You are listening to Radio Ramadan 365 podcasts.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Radio Ramadan 87, and I'm your host Zubair Akram with program Reflections. My guest, as always, is Shaykh Ruzwan Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
As people who've been listening to this program for last two episodes, so the first one was yesterday with Shaykh Ruzwan. We, inshallah, like other years, we have chosen a surah of the Quran. Actually, two surahs, Surah Fil and Surah Quraysh. And is other than I won't say it's a tafsir of Surah Quraysh or Surah. It's a conversation around Surah Fil and Surah Quraysh. And Sheikh, when we were choosing these surahs, or we were discussing about it, why would you say we should share this with the listeners? That why have we chosen these surahs?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So, if you remember back, I think generally we were discussing other things, and we ended up discussing whether we should do reflections live, and then if we were to do it, what would we cover? And I think it was actually your idea. You mentioned something about something you'd heard from some Maulana that you'd met previously, and it was something to do with fear or what was it? Something like fear or safety and security.
Economics.
Remember?
Yeah,
it was something about economics and
economy and yeah.
It was like economy and safety and security and how's that secured. And it came to my mind, Surah Quraysh and Surah Fil in some way are pivotal in addressing very deep human psychological desires for safety, security, but then also gratitude. So these two chapters came to my mind because there's a whole, when we go into them in detail, we will have a conversation around them. It's not a tafsir. The tafsir would take, much. I could give you both just now, and we'd probably take, before the break, we'd probably finish the tafsir of the two chapters. But essentially what the problem, I think, always with Muslims in their connection to the Quran recently meaning centuries, has been the lack of conversation with the Quran, a lack of searching out the alleyways and the roads that navigate the Quran to get answers to questions that they have themselves, and to try and navigate very deep spiritual, social, economic, political questions from the Quran itself. Whereas the Quran by its very nature is hudan lin-nasi wa bayinat min huda wal furqan. Yesterday we talked about that. It has guidance and it has pathways towards certitude and a criterion. So if it has that, then if all we're doing is collecting points of rewards by reciting individual verses and not reflecting upon them and allowing them to change the way we live and the way we act and the way that we engage with the world, and also we try and plan for the hereafter, we're really doing a complete disservice to the Quran. And so one of the ways of testing that is to actually go through a verse, two verses, a chapter of the Quran, and look at the reflective points, the points of reflection that we've not really reflected upon much. In other words, we read them very quickly. Like what's the most oft recited chapter of the Quran after Fatiha? It's probably Qul Huwallahu Ahad.
Surah Ikhlas.
Surah Ikhlas. And it's like if you're in a rush, you need to pray Fatiha, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Like the first word there, Qul, like that is in and of itself is such a deep point of reflection and inflection of what the meaning of the Quran is, that if we were just to reflect on that, then it would tell us the connection of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then why he's being brought as the intermediary between the message and the people being given the message, is to whom it's being given, which is ourselves as humanity. Why is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the intermediary of the revelation? So that's essentially why Qul is there, because what does it mean? It's not saying Allahu, you can't even say it. Allahu Ahad. Allahu Ahad. That's essentially what's being said.
Mm.
But it's saying Qul huwa Allahu Ahad. Huwa Allahu Ahad. It's not Huwa Allahu Ahad. It's Qul huwa Allahu Ahad. Who's being told? Say, O Muhammad. And because you're going to say it, there's going to be a depth and a precision and a force and a power that's going to be given to the message that's not going to be given if somebody else gave it, or it just came directly. Jumlatan wahida. As the Quraysh used to always say, they wanted the Quran to be given to them in one go. They wanted the Quran because it was completely disorientating for the Quraysh and the Arabs at the time, that the Quran came verse after verse after verse, undermining and basically taking away any ground that they had under their feet to argue against the Prophet ﷺ. So if you have an enemy like that, you want it to be over very quickly. I mean, yesterday there's Celtic supporters listening to this. Celtic lost 4-1 in the Europa Cup. In that kind of situation, you want it to be over. You don't want to stay and try and fight, because you're going to get defeated, and it's a question of time or how many goals the opposition scores. You just want it to be over. And the Quraysh, similarly, when the Quran was first revealed and it started to be recited by the Prophet ﷺ, and they saw people, the slaves and the young people and the women folk entering into Islam, and they realized their households and their society was crumbling in front of them. The economic power, the social power, the political power they had was all crumbling. All of a sudden, they said, why doesn't it just come down in one go? In other words, you at least you can deal with it in one go. Why is it torturing us? Essentially, for them, was a torture for 23 years until the final revelation. Why just get it? You know what they say in English: get it over and done with. Yeah. So they were essentially of that nature, and the Quran, what it does is it comes through the intermediary of the Prophet ﷺ, and he is coming and he's saying, Hu Allahu Ahad. And when they see the Prophet ﷺ, they cannot, they have to get rid of him. They have to essentially, at a certain point, just before the story of the Hijrah, they came together, all the tribes, and they decided to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ and to share the blood of his blessed being amongst all of the tribes. So the Quraysh would not be expected to have Bani Hashim attack them, because the blood would be spread amongst the tribes. So they got to the point where they couldn't argue with him, they couldn't dispute with him. But that was all to do with the fact that he was the message. This is why Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he famously said, لو لم تكن آية مبينة لكانت منظره ينبيك بالخبر. If God had not sent down the revelation itself, he himself, the Prophet, would have given you the message by his being, by his akhlaq, by the way he lived, and his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was like an exaggerated way of saying that. But so what my point is that sometimes we recite very short parts of the Quran in portions, and we don't understand the impact, we don't understand the resonation of meaning or the relevance of it to our own lives, which a lot of people always argue about and complain about. Well, they've got X problem, Y problem, millions of problems that people have. And if only they were to turn back to the source of guidance. It's not a source of just rhythmic tones which are beautifully recited in Taraweeh. It's not just a soothing melody which also has shifa. It has within its very core a very deep insight into the human psyche, because it's revealed by the creator of humans. It's created by Allah. It's revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a revelation in literary form in Arabic of the intent and words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from pre-eternity. So this is why, when we think about something, and this is why these two chapters are very interesting actually, because they're so historical, they're so restricted to a specific place, a specific geography, a specific ethnicity. So Arab, Quraysh, all the different tribes, the different tribes that are, inhabiting the Hijaz, and then, the area around Yemen, and then the area in the Golden Horn. All these areas are very specific and a very specific time. Like the year, as we'll see, will be the year the Prophet ﷺ was born. And so from one perspective, it seems to be so much restricted geographically and temporally to a people that are so distant to ourselves. Think about it. You're sitting where, I'm sitting where. The people around us are from which cultures and countries and languages. What's their concerns? Is it that time and that age and those people? Why are they so special? So there must be something that can be taken out of something so specific that can be universalized in a way that is essential to how we should live our lives. So if you look at...
going back to why choose a certain chapter to reflect, is it how... Okay, so again, I'm big on this, that we are... anything that we do, we are doing because we want to pass the test of this life. We want to live in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to live. The way He has ordained through the sunnah of the Prophet, seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to live. That's our belief system. Now, life is complex. It requires navigation through different situations, different things. My kind of like thought process is, you keep living your life and you get stuck and you have issues, you have problems, you want to solve them, and hence you dip into Quran. Then you approach Quran. We know from our friends, from our ancestors, from a revelation to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if you are wavering, if you have problems, you have issues, read. Is this the approach? Or we say you have to believe in Quran, you have to read Quran so that you can live your life. Which side do you approach first? You live your life and then, or you read and then live?
So this is a good question, because it comes back to the idea of complexity, doesn't it? Everybody listening will have a complete different experience of life, different set of challenges, different set of opportunities, happiness, sadness, elation, dejection. Everything is in between, from the most extreme of one to the most extreme of another. So in and of itself, the people that will be listening and reflecting will be of different types and different educational types or different social classes, and everything is as that is, language and everything. You can imagine you can have complete extremities. Where the Quran comes in is, it comes to the Prophet ﷺ in the midst of that. He wasn't living by the Quran as revelation when the Quran came to him, because it doesn't make sense. The Quran was given to him as a revelation so that he started to inform his life through that. So when the Prophet ﷺ was given the revelation, he had to react to it. And so when each verse came, he had to react to it, and the community had to react to it. If you take the most basic example, the example of the drinking of wine, for example, first of all, it's mentioned in passing as a means of economic, power and sustenance and blessing. Then it's mentioned in the context of having benefits for people, but having harms. And then the Quran mentions, "La taqrabu as-salah wa antum sukara," do not approach the prayer while you're drunk. And then, at each point is you're reacting. The companions are reacting, thinking, okay, we buy and we sell. It has some aspects. We relax when we drink. Okay. But the Quran is saying, its harm outweighs its benefit. And then the intelligent person will have to react. And remember, people like Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Sayyidina Ali never drank alcohol because they understood that, but others did. And so when the Quran revealed, do not approach the prayer while you're drunk, then the companions had to react to that. So as they are living their lives, the Quran is coming and it's telling them, okay, you need to readjust, you need to re-maneuver, the driving wheel that you have to turn right or turn left. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verses that prohibit wine, this completely absolve yourself of it and completely remove yourself of it. That is a revelation which then leads to a reaction, which is to completely dissociate with alcohol. Okay. So at that point, you are reacting and you're bringing in the Quran into your life. Now, once the Quran is revealed, there's no software update you can do in one go to take in all of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
So that imagine you're living your life and you want to know how to live your life, and you update with a software update, and it comes into your being, and you can decide based upon the Quran. That's not how it works, because the human being's complex. The human being is based upon reflection and learning from experience. And so Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, rahimahullah, he said that the Quran was built on one of the main pillars of the Prophet ﷺ's teaching in the Quran was this idea of tadarruj, this process of gradually changing, gradually developing, gradually maturing. And even in life, we see even cheese, you have mature cheese, meaning it's gone through processes. You have mature people that have learned from experience, and wise people who have learned from past episodes in their life. So everybody, to be human, you have to go through a process of education, and you have to go through a process of maturity to realize essentially the naivety of your previous you.
Yep.
The naivety of the earlier you, which is why they always ask questions to famous people, and they say, if you were to meet the 16-year-old you, what would you say to him or her? Imagine you're 50, 60 or something, and you've done lots of things, and they say, imagine yourself speaking to yourself when you were 16. What would you say to that person? Because what the question has inbuilt is that you've learned something over that period of life that you cannot just update through one press of a button and become wise at the age of 16. You have to go through inna ma'al usri yusra, the same idea of with difficulty comes ease. Again, with simplicity comes multiplicity, and difficulty and maturity and success. And so even any story of the Quran, you take the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, you could say he had the dream, and he mentions it to his father Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam. In other words, that was the whole software for his life. Like at some point, and Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam knew exactly what was happening. If he's saying, I see myself, and I see the sun and the moon and stars prostrating to me, his father knew exactly what that was, but he couldn't fast forward it to the point that he is sitting as a governor in Egypt, and his brothers are coming, and they pay homage to him, and his mother and father come as well. He couldn't, because he has to go through the experience of ups and downs. And think of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Ups and downs are as much as you can imagine anybody being. His brothers take him, throw him into the bottom of a well, leave him for dead, get a sheep, slaughter it, cover his shirt with blood, take it to the father. The father knows that his son is alive, but he has to play along with the anguish, loses his eyesight, and the Prophet Yusuf is passed from slavery into prison, into the heights of opulence, back into prison and out, and then all of a sudden gets to the highest place in the country. He could have done that quickly, but the experience of success and failure is then tied to reward, is tied to remuneration. Like in a business, if you do well, you get remunerated. But prior to remuneration and getting your prize, there's all these difficult sleepless nights, difficult decisions. Think of all even business people that have gone through business. They tell you times when this company broke and failed, and this failed, and this failed, and then this later on was successful. That's life. And if you take that out and you say, okay, the Quran is an index book where you find your problem and you look at the index and you apply it and you get the benefit, then everybody would be the same. The Muslim and the non-Muslim would know there's a book where if you look at the index for success in business or success in this life and the hereafter, you go there and you apply it and you get it, right away. It's not possible, because life, as humans, we know life is complex, and all the moving parts in everybody's story are different. Like in your life, the moving parts are different from my life. So the advice is going to be based upon now reflection upon the thing that will fit your, the specific download that will fit your life. which will be based upon your reflection. Because I can't reflect for you. I'm helping, or we're helping other people reflect. And the reflection that we have, we'll try and make it as universal as possible. But for me, when I'm speaking, I might think of something that's only specific to me and I won't say it, but I know, okay, I found this out in this chapter today or this verse, and I'm happy I did it because I reflected.
So, I think I'm going to take an ad break with this thought, people who are listening, that after the break, I'm going to reflect collectively with Sheikh Ruzwan and with all the listeners. So, why should we consult Quran as our life savior if it isn't an index? If it isn't a problem solver? I just want to unpack what is Quran then, and then go on to why we have chosen these two surahs out of Quran to reflect in this month of Ramadan. A short ad break, and inshallah we'll be right back. So, why is Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam special? Maybe we need to reframe it. Maybe I'm not saying it correctly. Yeah. So one of the reasons we say Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is who he is because he brought Quran to us. Correct, Sheikh?
One of many reasons.
One of many reasons. But just before the break, actually, is going to take me to a different direction now.
So I'm wondering where you're going with this anyway.
He is the reason. He himself is the reason. He is the message. Alayhi salatu wassalam. But okay, let's stick to our topic because this will take us somewhere else. And it is, why should I approach Quran if it isn't an index? Why, if it doesn't give me solutions to my problems, why should I approach it? Yes, I have a problem. My problem is living this life. My problem is navigating through my issues of life. They're real issues. They have, they cause me stress. They cause me, happiness, sadness. So regulation comes from somewhere, regulating all these things. And if I can't just dip into an index, here it is, here's a button, I press, and there's a solution. Why should I?
So that comes back to framing that and just understanding that, because the Quran is not an index book. So if it was an index book, it wouldn't be revealed in the way it was revealed, which is something that a person can study and deep dive into for their whole life and specialize in Arabic language, go into morphology, grammar, etymology, go into language, linguistics, and still just scratch the surface of it. So it's from one perspective, the fact that it is it's a mu'jiza, it's a miraculous revelation. It's an incapacitating revelation, which means it's mu'jiz. And one of the definitions of the Quran is kalam Allah al-mu'jiz, the incapacitating speech of God, meaning the inimitable speech of God, meaning it can't be copied, it can't be changed, it can't be used to create something similar to it. So for that to be the case, it can't be, it can't be like I was looking through my library a couple of weeks ago, actually had this software book about using different suites, software suites, and how to use it, and it has an index, and if you have this goes wrong, you do this, check this, X, Y, and Z, and then you get to a solution at the end. So I was doing something else with a streaming software, and I looked for the solution to the problem of the stream, freezing all of a sudden on the computer, and it gives you 5 or 6 different options of what to do. The CPU's like this, or the bandwidth is like this, or there's lots of these different things that come up, indexed, which are technical issues which require an index. Your car has a problem. You can go to do a diagnostic test, especially if it's an electronic management system. You can do a diagnostic test to check what the problem with your car is. So human beings we're not of that nature. We're not mechanical entities. And even the thing that makes us happy or sad is made up of very complex, at one level, chemical movements and some emotional movements and psychological movements. And also, we believe, ruhi, spiritual movements as well, where we get a degree of spiritual elation from something. And so, because human beings are so complex, to ever attempt to say that the Quran is simply an index book which you dip into to find solutions to problems is doing a disservice to, first of all, the complexity of the human being that God has created, and also doing a disservice to the depth of the Quran, which doesn't just apply to you, but will apply for every single person from the time it was revealed up until the end of time, and it will have the same depth and the same, ocean of knowledge that everybody needs at the time that they need it. So what is then being said, it doesn't have an index, but what it does have is the invitation to reflect and to find real tranquility over the spread of your whole life. Because if you're saying, I have a problem now, today, and I want it sorted now, well, when you make dua, you don't always have it accepted. First of all, you don't usually make the dua that you should make. And then if you do make the dua that you do make, it may be not the dua that is best for you. And if it is the dua that's best for you, it may be best that it's given to you there. It may be best that it's given to you later, or it's maybe better that something else is given to you, or you're given it in the hereafter. So that's the Prophet said about dua. You can have a dua which is muddakhir, which is hidden for you or saved for you in a certain place, because it's not the best thing for you, the best option for you. Because again, the person who lives for their own self, and they have this self-fulfilled desire to do exactly what they want, and that's it, will want what they want now, and that's like a childish psychological trait. النفس كالطفل إن تحمله شب على حب الرضاع, as Imam Busiri says, that the nafs is like a child. It needs to be weaned off the mother's milk. It needs to be weaned off, because if you just get what you want, and the index for the child is to have the milk of the mother, it's not be able to enjoy all the food that we have now for iftar. Like all the delicious dishes are for a child who is not weaned from the mother, is something that will create stomachache and will be unpalatable. But think of the world's cuisines. They're all based upon the fact that people had to move from water and just simple milk to something more complex, which means that what you want now is not what you need. And perhaps if you allowed yourself to mature, you would realize it's not the case. And so in the same way that you, in your own experience, and everybody who's listening knows that what they were like yesterday is not like what they were a week before, or a year before, or 10 years before. And they're maturing in their understanding. They're able to understand things better. And that comes through experience. Tadabbur, which is reflection on the Quran, follows the same principles. So the Quran is synced into the way that we as human beings will develop. And that's based upon a process of reflection. Reflection doesn't happen right away. It happens through a period of phases that they say the penny dropped.
Yeah.
Because that's through reflection or experience. The penny dropped. Ab samajai mujhe. It's a universal experience that people realize something that they felt was bad for them is actually good for them. And this is the basis of art, literature, is all based on that idea of maturity and realizing the end being much better for you. So absolutely, the immature soul wants everything as it is now, as a solution to the problem that they face now. But sometimes, it's like one of our teachers, Shaykh Habib Umar, somebody asked him about the difficulties of this day and age, and the ummah is going through real difficulties and darkness. And he said it's only in the most pitch darkness of night that the proximity of daybreak emerges. It's it's when the night is at its darkest that that the refraction of the light from the horizon will reach and start to give light. And so you have to experience that.
with your experience of life and with your scholarship and with living with scholars and also involved in um, the pursuit of knowledge, would you would you see that nations, communities who are taking their life decisions through Quran, through revelation, are materially different from the ones who are not?
Mm,
Their outlook is different, their endpoints are different, their engagements with other communities are different.
mm.
Can you say that safely? It is the case.
I mean, safely. I mean, in terms of depends what your barometer and
Mm,
marker for success or
mm,
advancement is. But at the level of the fact that you come into existence, you live and you die in between those periods, and what marks you in that period as being successful is essentially happiness, sa'ada. It's like this idea of contentment with what you have.
mm,
And I think, unless you say, well, no, the barometer for happiness is that I earn over $70,000 a year and I have a house and a car and X, Y, and Z. These are means by which we get to the point where we have contentment, happiness, and we feel at one with where we are, with ourselves, with the people around us, and we feel we know our place in the world. And at the core of that is knowing the big question, which is, how did we come here? How do we have a soul? Why do we
mm.
feel affinity to poor people? Why do we want and pulled ourselves towards good? That is the biggest question. Unless you answer that question, you leave life utterly disabled and discontent and always wanting something more. And this is
So
why.
what I'm hearing is that you're solving these questions, right? Where did you
Mhm,
come from? Why did you come
mhm.
to this world? And how are you going to spend the years you have for your life?
Yeah. And everything other than that, the things that we say are, say, for example, American defense budget spending, for example, or its ability to go to different countries in Venezuela and pick up the president and bring him back to
Mm,
America
mm,
and mock him. So all these things are just, uh, as the Quran says, do not,
mm,
in Surah Al Imran towards the end, it says, do not allow yourself to be deluded by the prancing of those that disbelieve upon the earth. Mata'un qalil. It's a small period of time. Thumma ma'wahum jahannam. It's basically,
mm,
you can see these people boots on the ground wherever they want and power and authority, but essentially it's a small moment in history.
mm,
And in fact, this
mm,
is what will
mm,
come out when we look at Surah Fil, is a small moment in history. Power, authority, military strength is a small moment in history, which does not give rise to what human beings would be happy with. In other words,
mm,
as human beings, as what does it make what is it that makes us human beings? What is it essentially that we would like to look ourselves in the mirror with as a human being? Essentially, think of anybody in the face of this earth, if they could stand in front of a mirror for a minute and look at
mm,
themselves and say deep down that they're happy with themselves. Now, the people with power, authority, I mean, I was watching an interview just literally about 15 minutes before we started with Tony Blair. I think it was Radio 4. And basically the interviewer was trying to get him to the point where he was basically saying, okay, in the dark of night, do you not think about what you've done? And you could
mm.
see he's avoiding it. You could
Yeah.
see he was avoiding the fact that he caused over 1 million deaths in the Middle East through his championing of the American invasion of Iraq. Like
Mm,
everything that's happening in Syria, even in Libya, all this came out of the interventions. And so that person he can go into any NGO, he can go into any kind of board, honorary member, he can go into any think tank. But the reality is, behind those eyes, you see a tortured individual.
yeah.
And so, how is that more? I mean, this is the problem I think with Muslims, is that how is that they want to be at that table where they have power, authority, strength, and they have the ability to maneuver in the world as these powers maneuver. But essentially, at the end of it, these are like the Prophet ﷺ passed away in complete peace on his own bed. Not with, and just having passed on a way of living to his companions, he was content with that because he hadn't spread the message beyond the Arabian Peninsula. They hadn't gone to the Persians or the Romans, but he had managed to embed this simple idea of looking at the world, looking at yourself and how you live and how you become human. And because he'd passed it on to the people around him, who were beloved to him.
Hold. 3 powerful things here. Looking at yourself. And the second thing you said, one is you look at yourself, how you conduct yourself, and how you interact with others. 3 things, right?
I can't remember what I said.
Yeah.
So that's your job.
Allahu Akbar. So yeah, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
But my point of that is that is success as human, because when you pass away, are you going to worry about your legacy on your gravestone or what you left behind, apart from the things that will benefit you, which is the things that Rasul mentioned about waladun salih yad'u lah, person, offspring that prays for them, or sadaqatun jariyah, or ilmun yuntafa'u bihi. These things, obviously, but these are because they emanate from you being a good person. Like if your child does dua for you and they really miss you, it's because you did something to affect them humanly. Do you understand? Like at a human level, not that you set them up with a trust fund. I mean, think of it. You set up your child with a trust fund and they're set for life. They could curse you because of that. But if you just have the personal affability with the child and the emotional connection with the child, and you left them nothing, they will make dua for you for the rest of your life because you had a connection with them. And so that's the people that are closest to you. And so who cares about the people that are further? And nobody cares about it. And so the Quran does flip everything and say, okay, power, authority, you've got Fir'aun and you've got Musa. You've got the Prophet ﷺ and you've got the Quraysh. You've got all these extremities of worldly strength and power. And then you've got this God-centeredness. And so the book is for what? Alif Lam Mim ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It's a guidance for people that have fearful awareness of God, not people that want to increase their GDP of their nation state or to want their nation state to be powerful. If it makes them muttaqeen, absolutely. If it makes them stand in the face of the oppressor, absolutely. But on the basis of what? On the basis of they have fearful awareness that their centered aspect of this is on God's existence.
Reflections with Shaykh Ruzwan Muhammad. And I'm just going to, for the benefit of the listeners as well, this is the surah we are going to approach, inshallah, in next few episodes. Just listen to the recitation and the translation just now.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل.
Have you not considered, O Muhammad, how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant?
ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل.
Did he not make their plan into misguidance?
وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل.
And he sent against them birds in flocks.
ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل.
Striking them with stones of hard clay.
فجعلهم كعصف مأكول.
And he made them like eaten straw.
Sadaqallahu al-Azim. So this is one of the 2 that we're going to cover, and the other one is Surah Quraysh. We're not going to go deep into this just now, not in this episode. Can Shaykh, again, final moments before iftar on this third day of Ramadan in Glasgow. Iftar today is, by the way, 5:38. A few minutes left. So, approaching Quran and why we choose what we choose to read and reflect is sometimes where we are in our journey of life, and the discussions we are having with ourselves, reflections that we are having with ourselves, that where I am, where we are. And a question that always is a problem for me is that every big civilizational or individual endeavor is to solve only two problems. One is economy and the other is security. I started watching Ertugrul again in Turkish language without any transcript. So just to improve some Turkish. So the whole season, the half of the season, laying down the civilizational pursuit is green pastures, more secure place. Moving from one place where there is famine to a place where there will be pastures, there will be greenery, there will be economy, there will be happiness in life. And happiness is brought to you by more affluence, if you like. And then to safeguard that, you need to have valor, you need to have army, you need to have people who can protect you. And this is where, when we were discussing what we were discussing in your front room a few months ago, Surah Quraysh, two concepts, amanahum min khawf, and
أطعمهم من جوع.
atamahum min ju wa amanahum min khawf.
Yes. That's where it came from. You mentioned,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where it came from. Okay.
Atamahum min ju wa amanahum min khawf. Relieving you of hunger and protecting you from fear.
So this is the end of the two. Remember, these two chapters are back to back. They're very close in terms of revelation, as we'll see. But essentially, as we also see, they were considered by, or look, if you look back, you'll see that they were almost considered to be one chapter together, because of the very clear cause and effect. You know, if this, therefore that, sequencing of the chapters, which again is not about historical. It's not about a specific tribe, Quraysh. It's not about the elephant or what the elephant represents. It represents a paradigm, a universal paradigm, whether you're in New York or you're in Scotland or you're in Jakarta. It's a universal, it's like, we might talk about this actually, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a famous hierarchy where the very basis of it is you just biologically need to survive, food. And then you have things like shelter and safety. And then you have things like social connections and, happiness. And then you have self-actualization and leisure at the tip. These are like the icing on the cake. Like, you don't live your life just to have nice ice cream. You know, unfortunately, what modern society has got us to is that the whole purpose of life is to get that new food into your stomach and allow it to go through your bowels and come out the other side. That's the pinnacle of society now. You have programs on TV which are all about cookery. These are the apex of, desirables, but at the very basis of life is just survival, and then this idea of safety, security. You can build social bonds, you can have family, you can have all these contentment issues about a strong family unit, and then you have those other things, and that's why I think this chapter will be very interesting, because it seems as if it's a historical footnote. A lot of people, when I've spoken to them about these chapters, they always say like, oh, it's a story about a king and an elephant, and God showed them who's boss. Without understanding that there's a connection of that to Surah Quraysh as well, and that Surah Quraysh is not about the tribe, about saying, oh, there's a tribe in Arabia that was called Quraysh and the Prophet belonged to it, and they were special, and that's it. So we need to respect the Quraysh, respect, that is not what's happening. And this again goes back to tadabbur, reflection.
So we're saying that Quran, not being a history book, whatever is mentioned as history is only to map to our conditions, to our own situations.
So it's not in terms of its historicity, it's not a book of history, but it's not made up history. It's not as if the narratives are not correct or they're not real. They're not just metaphors or myriads of ideas. They're actually real, but they're told to us for a function. So you'll find the same story in the Quran, like the Prophet Musa, his narrative, his discussion, the Prophet Ibrahim when he meets the angels when they're coming to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the same thing, but it's described in different ways in different parts of the Quran, because the point is not to be historically accurate in terms of what was said in the language, because it's in Arabic. It's to get the thrust of why they were saying what they were saying at the time, so that we can reflect and take something out of it. And so that is essentially, it's mentioned for us. Like if the story of Musa alayhi salatu and Fir'aun is mentioned to us, it's historical, but it's also because, look, the paradigm, there's a archetype of oppression, and the oppressor and the oppressed, and this idea of justice and freedom of human beings in front of God. These are paradigms that are absolute, and today as applicable, as relevant as ever. And so, it's a kind of it's a test run to reflect. So people, when they read a verse and they say, oh, this is about that time, long time ago, the Prophet Shu'aib, or, the Prophet Idris, or, so it's just, oh, it's nice to know that happened and he was successful. No, it's going to have in direct relevance to you. If you just reflected upon the thing that you're passing by very quickly. In the Quran, we always go to something that catches our eye, which we find immediately beneficial or worthy of interest, or piques our interest. But a lot of the times it's in these very obviously historical aspects of the Quran that you find some of the most deepest meanings, deepest lessons.
So what we're saying is that whenever we approach Quran, as we will be reflecting on these two surahs in next few episodes, whenever we as individuals approach Quran, we need to always seek its relation to our life, to our situation.
Why? Yeah, ask the why, ask the how. Ask the questions.
So, not just recitation, tadabbur. Tadabbur means deep understanding, deep reflection.
Recitation is a given. It's like a given, you do it. But then with the recitation is another thing, which is tadabbur, which is reflection. Tadabbur is done so that you can then use it. Because recitation is collecting the reward of preserving the Quran and honoring the Quran, and being at one with the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In and of itself is an amazing boon and quality. But then the Quran was also revealed to reflect and to implement and to benefit, enrich a person's life. And so if you can you do both. Reflection is a small part of it. The recitation is another part of it.
Just finishing off today's reflections, just a few final moments, Shaykh. Coming down from like the whole philosophical aspect of how we should approach Quran and what benefits it will give us if we approach it in a certain way. Over the centuries, our ancestors have taught us an adab of Quran, of how to treat it in our daily lives. Any kind of tips for all the listeners who just kind of nearing their opening of the fast for approaching Quran on daily basis?
In terms of my own experience, I remember when I was in different Muslim countries, walking back from even the most bustling of commercial areas, you'd have the owners of the businesses sitting outside their business just before they open reciting Quran. there was this sense of a small portion, even a page of the Quran, they would recite as a wird, which is basically something they did every single day. And our elders, I mean, my parents, it was a given that we would know that they would recite this every single day. And that's missing in our young people. They have lots of, fads and social media output. And, they have, alhamdulillah, the amazing people, young people. But just that, the graft of sitting and reciting, you need to revive that. Every single day you do a certain amount. It's like a given. And until you do it, you don't feel like you've woken up. You can't get on with your life. That is an amazing, basis of barakah in your life, just to connect with the words of Allah without reflection, just reciting and connecting, having wudu and reciting a certain portion, whatever is mutayassar, whatever is easy and applicable to you at that time. Every day do the same amount, which has been a cultural tradition. It's been something passed from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. When they traveled to like a Sham, Abu Darda radiallahu anhu had a place just where I used to live in Damascus, where he used to sit and teach people. So every part of the Muslim world is marked with all these places where people sat and recited and just connected. It's the month of the Quran. It's a month of that banquet of the Quran, which is from one level just reciting and hearing,